So let's do for 2, implement the results display module. So I have the instructions up, I have my live server rolling, and I have my code ready. So in this case, I've already created my results-display JS. In my app.js, I've also imported it, and I'll close this, and then I have the base file with the instruction here, which would be in the app.js. This would go at the top, and then in the result.js. Okay, so this to me is like when we get to the, honestly, it's all fun, but now it feels even more fun because we've done all this work and now we actually get to see the results of our work on the page. So one of the things, and we covered this when we talked about this in the attendance, is if I come down here to the bottom and I hit inspect, I can see that results section. Okay, I can see it's got a class, it's got an ID, and it's got a style. And so right now the style is display none because it's not going to be shown until the user has submitted something. But if I put block in here, okay, then it shows up. So this is what we're going to be working on today, is now that we can both get the input from the user, calculate it based on our calculator module, and now we're going to display it. Okay, so of course the change that I just made over here was temporary, so let's actually make that change permanent, or not permanent, but just for the duration until we get to the place in the code that will actually handle turning this on and off. So in here, for me on line 86, there is the none. So I'll change it to block. So then it'll show up every time. It'll just show up. Because the other thing we'll do is once you calculate, then we'll show this. But for now, just to kind of make our lives a little easier. All right, so then I have my sources. Good to go. All right, so now what I want to do, now that I have imported the JS file for results, I have my context set up. Pretty much what we're doing this time is outputting results. So what we need to have reference to, and I should have stayed on elements because it's really where I'm going to spend all of our efforts today, is when I come down here and I look in our div, in our ULs, right, so our unordered list, I have all the IDs. So these are the IDs I'm going to end up needing, but first I'll set up a query selector for this, for the results. So let's do that first, okay? So I'll say const results container, because it is a container. I mean, the container only in the sense that we have a place in our document that holds, in this case it's a section, but we think about it, when we think about HTML, as a container often. So we'll get elements by ID, and so in this case we'll call it results, so that way we have that reference. And like all good starting, we always say, hey, did that work? Did I have a correct reference? And because it's loaded, then I can stop here and then roll back over and see, yep, I have access to that entire container. Okay, cool. Do I have any comments on this one? Right. Yeah, that's good, and we already did this. Okay. So we did this, right? So now we get, okay, so now, oh, actually I already had that up as well. Okay, that's good. So we're gonna, this is what we just did. So we're getting the elements inside the container. Actually, this is what we're about to do, actually now. Okay, so it wasn't the same as this one up here. Oh yeah, actually it is different. Okay, I need to stop and read. Actually, no, I had it. So actually, now that I look at it, I had it in the wrong place. Because now that we have that container, now we can get the individual ones. Okay, so now we would say const, and this is where we name things. We're giving it its actual, what we would read to understand. We choose this total footprint display. is going to be equal to, because remember, like we did on the form handler, we're going to do reference the result container dot, in this case, query selector. So it says select. So in other words, look into here and query in this case. And just because I don't want to type these in correctly, I'm going to go back over to elements like I had before. I'm going to drop down my div and drop down my UL. So I can just grab these, right? So here's my, okay. And remember, when you're doing query selector, because it's an ID, you do need to give it that. Now there's a couple things we could do, and you'll see me do this maybe along the way where it kind of makes sense. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, but I can do control, yeah. So in this case, I did control, shift, alt, and down arrow, and that just duplicated the item from above. So I don't have to do as much typing. So now in here, because footprint display will be always the same, I'll do household and then footprint display, and then I can run over here and go, okay, I got household. That's the next, oh, did I? Oh, I did. Look at that. Actually, I missed the first one. It was actually up in here. Okay, footprint total. So what I meant by that was I grabbed the wrong ID there. Okay. But again, this saved me a bit of typing because it was just easier. So I could do the same thing, shift, alt, down. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'd probably now start with making sure I had the right one. I'd grab the ID here for home size. Okay, home size looks good. And then here I would do home size. Uh-oh, spell it right. Okay. Let's do another one. Okay, so we now have 2, 4, and let's go look at our ID. Okay, now this is interesting because food diet, the ID itself, is not completely consistent with the way we're naming things, but as long as we understand what it represents, right? So in here, so we'd go over here, get rid of this, and do food diet. Okay. One more. Okay, so now we're going to go get that last one. Cool, right? Good. And now it'd be food. And maybe that's why, because it was consistent with the second one. Packaging, display. Okay, so it's like anything with life. Once you do a little coding, you should always do a little checking to make sure. So step, step. Roll back through. Yep, that makes sense. Roll through. Oh, it's actually just now running that one. So if you get null on any of these, that means your ID reference wasn't correct. Okay, so that's what you want to look for. Okay, so good. So it looks like all of my references were indeed correct. So why do I need these, right? So I've set up this variable with the query selector into the ID so that I can now update it. And there's reasonings behind why you might not use, because you could use get element by ID for each of these because they do have an ID, but it's a little bit more performant, meaning it's a little bit faster on a larger scale. If you just go query something you've already done that costs a little more performant-wise before our code, not a big deal. Okay, just going forward, you might think about it. Okay, so now we're going to, let's see, and now we're going to display the carbon footprint in that section. Okay, so now what are we going to do? So now we're actually going to set up first our function that's going to do this. Okay, so const display results. Now, in this case, you might wonder, why are we calling it results-display? And then when we're actually writing the function, because it's kind of like you want to read it like English, like this function, this module is taking the results and display, but this specific function is actually displaying those results. So But sometimes there's a lot of thinking that goes into this, and sometimes there's not. The funniest joke I've ever heard about coding is that the two hardest things about coding is naming things and naming things. Okay, so now in this case, we know this is going to be exported, okay, so that we can call it. And we know in this case, we're also going to be actually calling it and passing something to it, right? So, but for now, right, let's just give our traditional, right? So we know, right, inside the display results function. Okay. So now where are we going to call this from? Well, in this case, we have calculated results, because imagine when you're hitting submit on the when the event listener here listens for and has a submit, then we're doing all these steps. So it would make sense here to actually say, and in this case, we're not actually going to get a return value. Just think about that. No return value. All we're doing here is displaying something. So all we have to do is say display results dot display results display dot display results. Yeah, right. Sometimes naming is the hardest thing. Okay. All right. So we got that. Cool. All right, so now let's just see if indeed it runs and we have at least everything wired up successfully. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit a submit. And then we got good. So we got our return. Oh, and here's our calculated results, right? So now we can pass it. So that's the whole point of part of doing this, right? So we could pass calculated results to it, and then we could here receive that as just results. Remember the idea. Again, I said you'll see things many times, and oftentimes it takes multiple times to see it to go, okay, we're referencing the variable that was a return value here. And now that we have that variable declared and assigned inside this block scope, we can now use that, passing it here. We can set up a different name here as the parameter, but it is still referencing, right, the, in this case, it's a return object literal, okay? Okay, so now we get to do the, okay, I keep saying the fun part, so let's do the little work before we do that, right? So now, all right. Oh, let me grab the whole thing. So display the calculated footprint results is what this is going to be. It's going to take in a parameter, right? This is what I was just talking about. That we have our input parameter is the results contain the calculated footprints, right? And now we're going to update each one. Okay, so now comes a little more typing, but also reasoning about what we're going to do here. Okay, so now that I have total, let's just start with the first one. Now I can call text content with this, which is a method. In this case, it's gonna look in this reference. It's gonna look in its text, and it's gonna say, I'm gonna update that. What do you want it to be? So in this case, I'm gonna do house size, household size, okay, colon. Now we're actually writing over some text that's already in the page, but for now it's fine to do that because we didn't specifically target, and I'll explain this when we see it in a minute. Results, okay, dot, in this case, how, okay, yeah, so now we're referencing the value, right? So we're going to reference in this case for the total, right? What is it? It's the total. And now I'm not getting, so I actually have to write these out, okay? Total footprint, okay? I believe that's right. And then we could say that is the end of that, and we could just say points, and now we can check it, okay? So we'll see if I got that one correct, because if you get the first one correct, it kind of helps you with the rest of them. So let's come down here, and actually we don't even have to set a breakpoint. Let's just hit calculate, And there we, oh, my bad. I even talked about it. Total. Oh, actually in this case, yeah, so actually on this one, okay, so this is good to talk about. So let's actually peer in here and see what I did, because in this case there was 0 points, right? So in the rest of these, and you can see this, they have the whole content that is the ID. So when we're doing text content, we actually have to replace not only the existing text, which by the way, we could have left this out, but it allows you to see it, which is part of why we have it in there. But in the first one, I actually didn't need to have anything except points, okay? Because that content was already, and let's just see if I now have that correct. Good, right? So because, I hope that makes sense, is that because, and it all comes down to understanding the way the HTML is set up. That's why I had to spend a whole attendance looking at it, but there's just things until you go to use it you may not always see, like I just did in that example. Okay, so now, and notice by the way how what happens here is and I just refresh, so now it goes back to the default, which is from the HTML, and whenever we calculate, then it injects, the code actually hits all those references, sets those up, and then targets that whole ID, in this case for the variable we have, and updates its text content. Okay, so I'm going to use my same trick. I may have to do a little more work this time, but that's okay. Okay, so not total this time. Now we do want household, right? So now we want household. Yep. Oh yeah, see that's where maybe doing this on the duplicates may not be as helpful, because we already have the references up there. So now we're going to do, right, household footprint. Good. Now in this case, right, so in this case we do need to give it a little more content because of the way our HTML is set up. Household size. Okay, so let's see if this one now worked. And in general, this process of coding and testing, so now we have our first one correctly done, right? So we could do a couple now, right? So we could do, okay, so now we're going to do, what is it, home size, right? So I'm just going to do this, home size, right? And then here is going to be, in this case, home size as well. I seem to always want to misspell that. Okay, so now I'm going to take a chance and actually do one more. Okay, so the last, no, actually we have 2 more, right? So now that I have home size, now I know I need diet. Oh, that's right, this was food diet. Okay, and over here, and this is where that consistency, that's what I was talking about, is the actual value, or the key in the results, okay, that is being passed in is actually diet type. This actually hung me up when I was kind of practicing with this code, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And that's where I had a first thought that maybe I'd go change it, but then I'm like, okay, it actually gives us a point to talk about why having code that's consistent can really be helpful in instances like this when you're just like doing a lot of, typing. Well, we're doing more in typing, we're coding. All right, so in this case, we'll also change this one because this would be diet type, right? Or let's call it consistent diet, okay? So food diet, and then it would be food. And I believe the logic here would be that, because the names, we're now looking at the output, so that's why maybe changing those made more sense. Okay, so there's one thing I haven't added here, but let's just see if these work. Okay, Good, we're inside of here, and oh look, oh, home size home size would be 0 because there's 0 in here. So if we did apartment and we hit calculate, okay, cool, right? So then that works. So this is the point of testing. It's like, okay, test all your inputs, see if they actually work. Cool, that looks, yep, 6, yep, that looks right. Okay. Cool. All right. So the one thing we didn't talk about here is that based on the numbers and the square footage and other things like that, you may get a number. Matter of fact, let's see if we can do that. Let's see if we, let's say, would that generate? Oh, because I had that checked. Oh, and that brings up the other good point is I haven't been clearing the results. We'll actually handle that in a minute. Okay, but just in case, and it's just kind of one of those fail-safe things to do, is after each of these values, if for some reason there may come an input that would actually be a decimal, we'd want to force that not to show it. So we would do something called fixed. That basically says, hey, take whatever that value is and fix it, which means basically round it. Okay, to fixed. That's right. Okay, so that after each of these, now we could do it for total as well. So actually now I'm just going to copy this. Okay, so it's basically saying whatever the value is here, then if it happens to be a decimal, just round it up to its 0 decimal point. It's a whole number. Okay, so we'll do that. Oh, here. Thought I had grabbed that, but I didn't. So I'm going to copy this. And I'll have you do a little further research here on this one. Make sure I have it in there, and in there, and in there. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so let's actually clear. I think I did it already, but we'll clear the form. We'll say there's 3 people. Let's say there's 20. Let's say eat dibby. Cool. So then there is our numbers. Oh, that's so awesome, right? Okay. So now that we've done that, the last thing we're going to do, which is we're going to make the entire results visible. We've done it right now in the HTML, and this should have been back to none. So let's write some code to actually make this. So let's go first into our HTML here and get rid of the block and put none, because on page load or on after clear, we'd want that page, right, to be not showing the results, because it's kind of nice dynamic feel to it in this case. Okay, so how do we do this, right? So we're actually going to do a couple things here. We could actually just at the end of our results, right, we could actually handle this. Matter of fact, I think I have some, let's do this. Let's make the entire results visible. This will be the code that does that. So we'll say results container, and we've seen code like this before, but it's been a little while, where we say, hey, on that there's a style, right? Let's just go show you that again, because if we didn't clearly say it, which I may not have, right, when we're down here, right, this on the container here is where the style is none. Okay, so that's why we can call style, and we could say that style we want to target as a display style, boom, this right here. Okay, and then in there we actually want to say, right, if we want it to be block. So this is dynamically doing what we just hard coded a minute ago, and that's a nice thing to do. So let's actually see that in action. Okay, I'm going to say 6. I'm going to say I have a big house. I'm going to say, okay, let's see what that does. So now it's hard. It may be a little harder to see because I have it on here, right? But if we were to do it here, that's awesome. Now the other thing, and we'll see this going forward at times, we can clear this. And so now we want to include in this particular button is that it clears the entry. right? So that's the last thing we'll do before we move on to the next one. So now, good, right? Because at this point, what else would, and we could talk about where we could call this to actually have it normally not show up, because it is block. So we'd want to on page load. That's actually where, but for now, what we're going to do is just call it. You'll see what I mean once we code this. Okay, so let's actually code another function, and in this case, we'll call it hide results. Okay, hide results doesn't need anything. Okay, equal to function. You can tell, actually, I'm used to writing arrow functions because I sometimes will start writing them. Okay, results container dot style dot display. Okay, equal, and in this case, none. So what we could do here, right? And actually, let's do it on both of them. Let's do it here, right? So hide. Okay. So this would hide them, and we could do this on page load. Okay, so where could we do that? Well, think about page load. Be here on init, right? And because we do have this access to the module, right? We could just call it here. So on page load, we could say dot hide results. So then, if it works right, on our page load, which already happened, right? And when we hit calculate, cool, right? We know we could, so now we could talk about where else would we put it, because when on our page load, then it would go away. So now what we'd also want to do is come over here on our clear and do the same thing, right? Hide result. Oh, actually, yeah, on the clear. So when somebody actually says clear the form, now typically, and we'll code for this going forward, typically after you do hit a submit, right, you will clear the form input so we could separate those two functions. But for now, okay, there is our displayed results. We could clear it. It clears the form. It also clears the output, right? But if we did hit submit and for some reason we hit refresh, it also clears it. Okay, I hope, let's see if I hope I got all. I think I did, right? So your prompt this time, and by the time you get here, I may have added something else, but what is toFix method and how should I use it when writing JavaScript? All right, so your progress here is implementing your your results display module, and then we'll have one more. Only 2 for 4.2. All right, talk to you next.